The first and last book of John Wilson. When the last visitor, an old man in a worn-out coat, finally left, John allowed himself to relax. The usual evening ritual, walking between the shelves, checking the locks, turning on the night lights. The books quietly observed him, like old friends who knew all his secrets. And the secret was simple. After 30 years of working at the library, John had never written a single word. Not that he hadn't tried. Every evening, he sat down at his old laptop, stared at the blank screen, and nothing. Today, everything was supposed to be different. He made himself some strong coffee, got out sandwiches, and turned on the laptop. The screen illuminated his weary face with a ghostly glow. "Today, I will write," he whispered into the silence. Thoughts swarmed in his head. Ideas begged to be written down. His fingers began to race across the keyboard, but the more he typed, the more fragmented the sentences became. Frustration mounted, and the letters blurred before his eyes. John exhaled sharply and, irritated, closed the laptop. Leaning back in the chair, he stared at the ceiling, trying to slow his heartbeat. But the anxiety that had smoldered inside him now raged, heavy and suffocating. The silence pressed down on him, disturbed only by the faint rustling of pages. The sound was too close. "It's just a draft," he muttered. But inside, he knew it wasn't. A sense of defeat hung over him. Pushing the laptop aside, John stood up and made his way to the bookshelves. The dark aisles stretched into the distance, immersed in silence that only accentuated the sound of his footsteps. The shelves rose high, like grand monuments of stories, guardians of secrets. Every cover, every title whispered promises of other worlds, of terrors and adventures that did not belong to him. John stopped at the horror section. There were Lovecraft, Poe, and of course King. His name gleamed almost unnoticed among the others. Running his finger along the spines of the books, he felt the familiar desire. If only. This thought had been with him for a long time, an echo of hope and inevitability at the same time. But tonight, something felt different. The rustling became louder, more insistent, as if someone was quickly flipping through pages. In the dim light of the night lamps filtering through the tall windows, his gaze caught an unfamiliar book. A black, glossy cover, golden letters. John Wilson. His heart skipped a beat. This was impossible. He had never published anything. Here, among the volumes of his idols, was a book with his name. With trembling hands, John reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the cover, he felt it. The book was warm, alive. He opened it and saw himself. Not a photograph, no. There were his thoughts, dreams, fears, stories he had never dared to tell. The shelves around him trembled. Shadows between the rows of books stirred, stretched toward him like black tentacles. John pressed the book to his chest, feeling cold sweat trickle down his back. The library, his quiet refuge, suddenly came alive, but not as he had always dreamed. The air thickened with tension. The pages of all the books began to turn on their own, filling the space with a dry, ominous rustling. It seemed as though an invisible wind rolled in waves between the shelves, lifting the smell of old paper and ink into the air. John breathed heavily, feeling the book in his hands pulse like a living heart. It was no longer just telling his story, it was reading him, flipping through the pages of his life, dissecting every memory, every unfulfilled dream. The sounds around him merged into a deep, ancient whisper, the voices of thousands of books speaking at once. John shuddered, suddenly feeling exposed before their invisible gazes. His own thoughts dissolved into this chorus, becoming part of something older and bigger than him. He tried to throw the book away, but couldn't. His fingers had already become part of the binding. his skin turning into paper, his blood into ink. The book wasn't just absorbing his story, it was turning him into a story. He felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, I will become a story. Finally, my name will be among theirs. The police could never explain the mysterious disappearance of the night librarian. On his desk, they found only cold coffee and an empty laptop. Security cameras showed him entering the horror section, but he never returned from there. A few months later, a young intern, checking the inventory, noticed a strange discrepancy. Among the volumes of King and Poe stood a book that wasn't in the electronic catalog. Black cover, golden letters, John Wilson, The Last Story. She took the book off the shelf, tried to open it, but to no avail. Eventually, she shrugged and put it back. John spent his whole life searching for the perfect words to write his ideal story. And now, having become a book, he waits for his ideal reader, who will never appear. Therefore, his story will remain unread, locked within its own striving for perfection. Thank you for listening till the end. Did you enjoy it? Then leave a like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so you won't miss the next chilling story. Fear loves you. See you in the darkness very soon. And remember, only the dead don't sweat and fear nothing.